welcome back to our Harkla YouTube channel. We're so happy to have you here again with us today. Welcome if this is your first time joining us. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and we are the Certified Occupational Therapy Assistants with Harkla. And today we're going to answer your questions all about sensory processing.
So as you know, we get a lot of great questions. We get them on Instagram, we get them on YouTube, we get them on DMs, we get them all over the place. These are some questions that we got specifically from Instagram, and we're just gonna jump in and read them, answer them, and hopefully it makes all the difference and helps you understand the sensory system a little bit more. First question. How do you know a sensory seeker versus a sensory avoider?
That's the all-time money question.
It is.
I think first, if you have a sensory seeker, you probably know because they're going to be on the move all the time. They might want to be touching everything. They might be putting things in their mouth. They might be making noises all the time. They're just going to be seeking more. They're always wanting more input in some way.
Almost like a bull in a china shop, right? You take them to the grocery store, they're looking at everything, they're touching everything, they're running up and down the aisle, they're holding onto the cart, they're swinging from anything that they can hold on the freezer doors, you know? Really, you think about all of the different senses, right? We have 8, and you can be sensory seeking to one of them, or to all 8 of them, or to a few of them. So go through each sense and think about it. Are they craving crunchy foods? Are they smelling everything, touching everything, jumping, running on the go all the time, looking at spinning objects, looking at the lights, just craving more input? It's almost like an unmet need that they just can't ever satisfy.
Yep.
That's what we want to think about for a sensory seeker.
And then a sensory avoider is the opposite. They're going to avoid different types of input because their body feels like it's too much and they can't handle it. They go into maybe a fight or flight response. But these are our kiddos who cover their ears when the vacuum cleaner is running. These are the kids who won't go on the playground equipment because they don't know how to maneuver their body and they're nervous with the slide. They're going to be picky eaters and avoid certain tastes, certain textures. Maybe even visually, they're going to avoid certain foods that look yucky or that smell different. They're not going to want to do those ones. These kids might not want to get their hands messy. They don't like touching things. They don't like playing in the dirt. So kind of the opposite of the sensory seeker. They're going to just try to avoid everything.
Yeah.
Not everything usually.
Yes.
But some things.
Exactly. Remember, think about those 8 senses. These are the kids who are a little bit, we would consider them the highly sensitive kiddos, the emotional kiddos. Generally, they struggle with regulating their emotions a little bit more as it relates to those sensory experiences. You know, as you were just talking about all the different smells, my 3.5-year-old, we went into a new place. It was the golf shop. We went golfing and we walked in. Like the gift shop? The gift shop, but there's a restaurant in there, and you go and you buy your bucket of balls and you go golfing, and we walked in and he was like, "Oh, this is a restaurant." And he's like walking through, plugging his nose, and I'm like, what are you doing, bud? He's like, "I just don't like the smell of it in here." I'm like, okay, you know, sometimes it takes our body a little bit to get used to it. And, you know, by the time we left, he had unplugged his nose. But it's really helpful just to not draw a ton of attention to it and let them kind of navigate their sensory world and see what feels right. But, you know, just be flexible and empathize with them too.
We do have a sensory checklist that we will link in the description below. It's free, you can download it, and you can use it to check off the different areas that your child seeks more input or avoids more input. And then that's a really great way to see what they need more of, what they need less of, and you can use that checklist to identify different activities that your child can do to help meet their sensory needs.
Yep.
Next question. My toddler screams constantly. Did you put this question in here?
You would think.
Okay, so my toddler screams constantly. How can I help a 3-month-old not suffer from the sensory overload?
Yeah, this is a very relevant question in my life right now. I would say, number one, it's okay for our newborns, our babies, to be exposed to loud auditory input. I think The number one rule of thumb in my book to help kind of mitigate potential sensory overload is to go outside as much as possible. For the toddler, for the newborn, go on walks, lay in the park, lay on the grass, look at the clouds, go to the park. You know, make sure that you guys are spending adequate amount of time outside if possible in order to help kind of regulate everyone's nervous system.
You could also have a designated space where your toddler can scream as much as they want. You could set some boundaries and say, when you scream in front of your baby sister or brother, it's too loud for their ears, it hurts them, but you can go to the backyard, or you can go to your sensory corner or your bedroom, and you can scream as much as you want there, and make sure you go with them and you help teach them, because toddlers aren't going to be able to do it themselves. So you set those boundaries, you help them do it so they're successful and they have a safe space where they can just scream as much as they want.
The last thing that I would think about adding is the Advanced Brain Technologies for Babies, the Music for Babies program, and turning that on throughout the day, especially when the older sibling is struggling. You know, on one end, it could be just one more piece of auditory input that's too much to process, but it could also help calm down everyone. So just, you know, having that on in the background, turning it on and listening to it and trying to keep some sort of calmness, which I know is easier said than done. Okay, next question. More in depth about sensory seeking, how to know, how to treat, etc.
Well, this is a good follow-up question from our first question, since we have the sensory checklist that you can download. It's linked in the description below. You can identify if your child is a sensory seeker, what areas they're seeking input in. Are they seeking out more vestibular input, more visual input? And then you can kind of find the different activities that fit in that sense, that category, and incorporate more of those throughout the day.
Yeah, and I think a common misconception for sensory seekers is that we need to calm them down and we need to provide more proprioceptive based activities in order to like weigh them down, slow them down, calm them down, lock them down, right? But in reality, we need to remember that we have to meet their sensory threshold, and our seekers have a high threshold. Like we mentioned earlier, they are trying to satisfy that need. Their brain is craving more input because that threshold, those messages aren't being received properly, or they're getting jammed when they're going to the brain, right, for a nice layman's term. So we need to meet their threshold. We need to be providing them with the type of input that they're craving. If they are craving vestibular input, we're going to give them more structured, high-intensity activities like swinging, jumping, running, crawling. We're going to try to get them that high-intensity input that they're craving, and then provide those organizing proprioceptive-based activities like pushing the walls, making the room bigger, pushing down on the head, you know, using a weighted blanket or a weighted vest or something like that. And so remember this with all of our senses. If they're craving oral input, instead of taking the oral input away, give them more crunchy foods, give them a smoothie to drink through the straw, give them an ice pack to put on their cheeks. So just try to meet that need where they're at.
And we do have another video that goes more in depth on meeting the sensory threshold, what it means, what it looks like, and we give you some more ideas that go off of what Rachel was just saying. So that would be a really good video to watch as well. Oh, and I think we have another video on sensory seekers. Don't we?
I think so.
Where we talk more about sensory seeking and we give you some more ideas. So we'll link those videos for you to watch as well.
It's just going to be like a rabbit hole of videos and podcasts to listen to in order to learn.
Yes.
You're welcome.
All right, last question for today. SOS. I have a student that has autism, nonverbal, and self-harms. Any input is appreciated. I've tried just about everything. We have a difficult time gauging his sensory threshold.
Yeah, this is a sticky situation for sure, especially if it is a client that you are working with, you know, only seeing them once or twice a week, or in the schools maybe, you know, a little bit more. I think making sure that you've done the sensory checklist, so you have a list of their sensory needs, what they're avoidant of, what they crave, what they enjoy. I would try adding in more preferred activities, more preferred sensory strategies if possible. I would focus really on the connection and the rapport, like remember we're humans. Remember, generally, self-harm is a form of regulation or communication. So really figuring out, if possible, what they're trying to communicate and focusing on connection, right? I think that's whenever I'm working with a child who's harming themselves or, you know, self-stimming in some way, it's how can we connect, how can we play, and incorporating more of those activities.
Yeah, you really have to kind of just keep it simple, especially when you're starting, when you're building that connection. You need a way to communicate with them, so that if they are not communicating verbally, then you need some sort of picture system, maybe an AAC device, or just, you know, simple pictures of the things you're doing so that they can choose and they can communicate what they want and what they need from you. But the big thing here is that they need to feel safe. So like Rachel said, self-harm is often a way of regulation. Maybe they need more input, or it could be because they don't feel safe in their environment, that maybe they don't feel safe with you because you just haven't provided them with that connection and safety yet. So really need to focus on that. Like Rachel said, figure out what they like, what they want to do, and start with that. Make it playful, get on the floor, and you really just have to take it back to the basics, keep it really simple, and open up that line of communication with a child like this.
Yeah. All right, hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully we got your question answered. If you did submit a question, if you haven't submitted a question, you have all the questions for us, let us know. There is a form in the description that you can fill out. You can always send us a message on Instagram. That's where we are generally hanging out, at All Things Sensory Podcast, as well as at Harkla_family.
We also have a podcast. It's All Things Sensory by Harkla. We're on the major podcast platforms, and we kind of do something similar to the YouTube video where we talk about all the different things and give you some tips to help.
If you are concerned at all about your child's sensory processing and modulation skills, we do recommend seeking out an occupational therapy evaluation. Talk to your pediatrician and advocate for that evaluation.
Yep. All right, we hope you liked this video. Hopefully it was helpful. Make sure you subscribe to the Harkla YouTube channel and share this video with a friend.
We will plan on seeing you next Tuesday for another video. You ready?
I guess so. Okay.
Survival Outreach Services! We need some help here in the sensory world.
That's what we are now.